Salvatore Moretti, known on the streets as the Black Hand, built an empire, so silent and untouchable that even the police feared speaking his name until Dominic Russo, the ruthless leader of the Crimson Vultures, decided to tear it all apart, igniting one of the deadliest mafia wars New York had ever seen. Salvatore Moretti was born in a cramped apartment above a bakery in Brooklyn, a place that smelled of fresh bread by day and cigarette smoke by night. From a young age, he learned that in his neighborhood, survival was a skill, not a privilege. His father was a quiet man who worked long hours kneading dough, while his mother, a seamstress, kept the family afloat with every spare penny. But Salvatore was different. He had sharp eyes that seemed to calculate every movement around him. By the time he was 12, he could read people's intentions the way others read a newspaper. That skill would become his greatest weapon. In his teenage years, Salvatore was drawn to the backroom card games and the men who ran them. They were well-dressed, spoke in low tones, and had pockets that never seemed empty. He ran errands for them at first, delivering envelopes to addresses he was told never to remember. His loyalty and silence earned him trust, and soon he was invited to watch the games. He studied every hand, every bluff, every man who walked away with a smile or a broken nose. By 18, Salvatore wasn't just watching, he was running games of his own in the dimly lit corners of the city. It was during this time he earned the name the Black Hand. The nickname came after a notorious incident where a rival gambler refused to pay a large debt. The man woke up one morning to find the symbol of a black hand painted on his front door. The next day he paid every cent he owed, and the black hand mark disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. No one ever knew how Salvatore managed it, but the story spread fast. From that day on, the symbol became a warning, and Salvatore became a name spoken with a mix of fear and respect. As his influence grew, so did the Iron Wolves, a crew of loyal men who followed Salvatore without question. They were a mix of childhood friends, street hustlers, and former boxers who knew the value of intimidation. They operated like a machine, each man knowing his role. Illegal gambling was their foundation, but it didn't stop there. The Iron Wolves began moving into high-stakes loan sharking, where desperate men borrowed money at rates that guaranteed their ruin. Salvatore had no pity for those who couldn't pay. Debts were collected one way or another, often leaving behind broken bones or broken businesses. Smuggling became another stream of income, and this was where Salvatore's cunning truly shined. He had contacts at the docks who could slip antique crates past customs inspectors with the right bribe or threat. Rare paintings, jewelry, and even historical artifacts passed through his hands, disappearing into the hands of wealthy collectors who never asked questions. Each job was meticulously planned. Salvatore didn't believe in sloppy work. He once made his men rehearse a warehouse burglary for 2 weeks before the real thing, memorizing every step like a dance. By the mid-1980s, Salvatore Moretti was not just another street boss, he was a silent ruler of a hidden empire. He never flaunted his wealth. While other gang leaders drove flashy cars and wore gold chains, Salvatore preferred a modest black sedan and tailored suits in muted colors. He understood that the quieter he appeared, the less attention he would draw from law enforcement. But behind closed doors, the wealth was staggering. Wads of cash were hidden inside walls, gold bars buried beneath rented properties, and valuable art hung in rooms only a select few could enter. His genius was in how he maintained power without stepping into the spotlight. Rivals disappeared not in broad daylight, but in ways that left no trace. Sometimes a man would simply vanish on his way home. Sometimes a business owner would close shop overnight, never to return. Salvatore left no fingerprints, no witnesses, no evidence, only the whispered warning of the Black Hand. The police knew he was dangerous, but could never catch him. Detectives followed him for months, yet he lived his life as though nothing was out of place, always one step ahead. Salvatore Moretti had built his empire on fear, loyalty, and precision. Every move was deliberate, every risk calculated, But in the criminal world, the higher you rise, the more enemies watch from below. And for all his careful planning, there were forces already working in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike at the man they called the Black Hand. If you want, I can now expand Chapter 2 to 600 words in the same intense style so your story flows like a gripping documentary script from start to finish. That would keep your audience hooked. In 1987, Salvatore Moretti's control over the city's underground seemed unshakable, but the criminal world has no shortage of predators waiting for a sign of weakness. That sign came in the form of a new power rising from the southern boroughs, a crew that called themselves the Crimson Vulture. Their leader, Dominic Russo, was nothing like the street-born gangsters Salvatore was used to dealing with. Dominic came from money, the son of a businessman with political ties, but he had the street instincts of a man who had seen blood spilled up close. He dressed in silk suits, drove imported cars, and had a smile that could put anyone at ease. But behind that smile was a mind as cold and calculating as Salvatore's own. Dominic began moving in on Salvatore's gambling spots with quiet efficiency. One by one, card rooms loyal to the Iron Wolves were taken over, dealers were offered higher pay, security men were bribed, and business owners were promised protection that came with the weight of City Hall behind it. Dominic's reach extended into places Salvatore could not touch: police stations, courtrooms, and even the offices of city council members. He had allies in positions of power who could make arrest warrants disappear and turn eyewitness accounts into meaningless gossip. At first, Salvatore tried to ignore it. He believed his reputation was enough to keep his empire intact. But when one of his most profitable gambling dens in Queens switched allegiance overnight, the message was clear: Dominic Russo wasn't just taking territory, he was dismantling the Iron Wolves piece by piece. Salvatore understood that if he didn't act, his control would crumble. The problem was that Dominic had made himself untouchable through legitimate fronts and deep corruption. Any open move against him risked drawing attention from the authorities, attention Salvatore had spent years avoiding. The solution came to him in the form of a daring, dangerous plan. Word reached Salvatore through his network of informants that the Crimson Vultures were expecting a shipment of uncut diamonds smuggled in from Africa. The shipment was worth millions and was set to be delivered to a secure location in the Bronx. If Salvatore could intercept it, the blow to Dominic's finances and pride would be devastating. The plan was simple in design but complex in execution. A small, hand-picked crew from the Iron Wolves would take the shipment in transit, strike fast, and vanish before anyone could respond. On a cold February night, the heist unfolded. The truck carrying the diamonds was forced to stop on a deserted stretch of road when a staged accident blocked its path. In minutes, the guards were subdued, the crates loaded into another vehicle, and the Iron Wolves disappeared into the shadows. The job was clean, too clean for the police to get any leads. By the next morning, the diamonds were gone, sold off to a contact overseas. Salvatore had dealt his blow, and the underworld buzzed with rumors that the Black Hand had struck again. But victory in the criminal world is never without cost. 3 days after the heist, the body of Marco Santini, one of Salvatore's oldest and most loyal men, was pulled from the Hudson River. His hands were bound with thick black rope, his face beaten beyond recognition. The message was brutal and clear. Dominic Russo knew exactly who had taken his diamonds, and he was ready to escalate the war. Salvatore's crew was shaken. Marco wasn't just an enforcer, he was family to many of them. The killing wasn't about money, it was about sending fear straight into the heart of the Iron Wolves. From that moment on, the streets of New York were no longer under the quiet control of one man. They had become a battlefield. Gangs that had once stayed neutral began choosing sides, alliances formed and broke in the span of hours, and whispers of ambushes filled every bar and back room. Salvatore knew that he could no longer avoid direct confrontation. Dominic Russo had crossed a line, and now the war between the Black Hand and the Crimson Vultures was no longer a possibility, it was inevitable. If you'd like, I can now expand Chapter 3 to 600 words, with the same dark tension so the escalation feels like a full-scale mafia war. That's where betrayals and paranoia will really start to take over. The war between the Iron Wolves and the Crimson Vultures did not erupt in gunfire on crowded streets or explosive car chases. Instead, it crept in quietly, a silent and relentless struggle fought in shadow. Businesses that had been loyal to Dominic Russo began burning in the dead of night. Fires gutted restaurants, warehouses, and clubs, leaving behind only charred walls and the acrid smell of smoke. None of the victims ever saw the faces of the men who did it, but every burned building carried the unmistakable mark of retaliation. Dominic responded in kind. Trucks moving supplies for the Iron Wolves started disappearing on long deserted stretches of highway. Entire shipments of cash, weapons, and smuggled goods vanished as if swallowed by the night. Salvatore Moretti knew that Dominic was behind it, but proving it was impossible. The streets were tense. People who had once done business with both crews began locking their doors, afraid to choose the wrong side. Rumors spread of late-night beatings, mysterious disappearances, and bodies surfacing in the East River. Salvatore realized that open meetings with his crew were now too risky. The police, though still unable to catch him, had increased their surveillance, and Dominic had eyes everywhere. To stay ahead, Salvatore began sending orders through coded messages hidden in the classified section of old newspapers. Each morning, certain words circled in ink carried instructions for his men, what routes to take, who to watch, who to silence. It was a game of patience, each side waiting for the other to make a mistake. Salvatore relied on loyalty, and until then it had never failed him. But loyalty is fragile in a world built on greed and fear. That fragility revealed itself in the form of Carlo Venturi, Salvatore's right-hand man for nearly a decade. Carlo had been with him since the early days, trusted with the deepest secrets of the Iron Wolf. What Salvatore didn't know was that Carlo had been quietly meeting with Dominic Russo, feeding him information about safe houses, stash locations, and the movements of high-value shipments. The betrayal hit the Iron Wolves like a knife to the spine. Acting on Carlo's intelligence, Dominic's men ambushed one of Salvatore's largest cash warehouses, hidden in an unmarked building on the edge of the Brooklyn waterfront. The attack was swift and merciless. Dominic's crew stormed the place, overwhelmed the guards, and vanished into the night with millions in cash and valuable antiques. By morning, the warehouse was nothing but an empty shell. The blow wasn't just financial, it was psychological. Salvatore had built his empire on the belief that no one could outsmart him. Now, one of his own had opened the door to his greatest rival. In the days that followed, paranoia consumed the Iron Wolves. Every man was watched, every phone call questioned, every move second-guessed. Salvatore trusted no one, speaking only to a handful of men, and even then, in vague terms. He ordered quiet investigations into every member of his crew, knowing that one traitor often meant more. But Carlo had vanished before Salvatore could deal with him. Some believed Dominic had hidden him away as a prize. Others whispered that Carlo had taken his payment and fled the city entirely. Dominic, emboldened by his victory, began tightening his grip on the city. He secured more businesses, more officials, and more territory. Salvatore's once vast empire was shrinking, block by block, as if Dominic was closing a fist around it. The silent war was no longer just a battle for power, it had become a personal vendetta, a clash of two men who understood that in their world, there could never be peace. It would end only when one of them was gone. Salvatore Moretti, the Black Hand, was running out of time, and the shadows he had once commanded so effortlessly now seemed to be closing in on him. If you want, I can now expand Chapter 4 to 600 words, so it becomes a tense, haunting conclusion with an unforgettable twist that will leave your viewers stunned. In early 1990, the city's underworld awoke to an eerie silence. For months, the tension between the Iron Wolves and the Crimson Vultures had been building toward an inevitable climax, but instead of an explosive showdown, something entirely unexpected happened. Salvatore Moretti disappeared.
One cold January morning he simply failed to show at a meeting and none of his trusted men could find him. His black sedan was discovered parked neatly in a side street in Staten Island, doors locked, no signs of struggle. Inside there was nothing but a half-empty pack of cigarettes and a folded newspaper with no coded markings. Theories spread quickly through the street. Some claimed Dominic Russo had finally made his move, snatching Salvatore and disposing of him in the old coal furnaces hidden beneath the docks. Others whispered that the disappearance was a calculated escape, that Salvatore had been secretly preparing for months, stashing away millions in offshore accounts before vanishing to South America or Europe. But no evidence surfaced, no body, no confirmed sightings, just a void where one of the city's most feared men had stood. In Salvatore's absence, the Iron Wolves began to crumble. Without their leader, loyalties fractured. Some members defected to Dominic's side, seeking protection. Others tried to run operations on their own, only to be swiftly eliminated by rival crews. Within weeks, Dominic Russo's dominance over the city was uncontested. He celebrated his rise in the way only he knew: lavish parties in his penthouse, fine wine and new business ventures under the guise of legitimate companies. To the outside world, Dominic had won, but victory in the criminal world is rarely without shadows. 2 months after Salvatore's disappearance, Dominic was found dead in his own penthouse suite. His body lay in his bed untouched except for one chilling detail: a single black handprint smeared above his headboard. There was no sign of forced entry, no security footage showing anyone entering or leaving the building. The guards posted outside swore they had seen and heard nothing all night. The police were left baffled, the death labeled undetermined, though everyone in the underworld knew exactly what it meant. The symbolism was too precise to ignore. For years the Black Hand had been Salvatore's signature, a warning that no debt went unpaid. The message above Dominic's bed was more than a threat. It was closure. To those who believed Salvatore was dead, it was impossible. How could a ghost leave such a mark? To those who believed he was alive, it was proof that he had returned, if only for one final act. In the days after Dominic's death, strange rumors spread. Some claimed to have seen a man resembling Salvatore boarding a cargo ship bound for Marseille. Others swore they had spotted him in a dim cafe in Buenos Aires, sitting alone with a newspaper. None of these sightings could be confirmed, but the stories persisted, passed from mouth to mouth like urban legend. The police quietly closed their file, unable to connect the two disappearances in any official capacity. The Iron Wolves never recovered their former power, but their name lived on in whispers, and the Black Hand symbol began appearing once more, small, almost unnoticeable, in places tied to debts, betrayals, and quiet revenge. Whether these were the work of Salvatore himself, or loyal remnants carrying on his legacy, was never proven. For the people of New York's criminal underworld, the truth no longer mattered. What mattered was the fear, and fear was a currency that never lost its value. To this day, no one can say for certain what happened to Salvatore Moretti. Some believe he still walks among them, older, quieter, but watching from the shadows. Others insist he is long gone, his final act against Dominic Russo serving as the perfect ending to a reign built on precision and terror. But one thing remains certain: wherever the Black Hand appears, someone's time is running out.